So Candace Owens was released from the Daily Wire, fired basically, and a lot of people have been talking about it. She has been kind of making the rounds on a lot of social media, podcasts, shit like that. When I was scrolling through the just a little bit ago to get the stuff that I needed in terms of talking about what was going on, um, which is just like a few things. Most of the stuff I can just talk about off the top of my head because I've been keeping a close eye on this whole situation. But basically, she got fired for being anti Israel. Because ever since the October 7th attacks, Candace Owens has been pretty critical of Israel as the way it has been operating. But here's the thing when I say she has been anti Israel, I do not mean that she is pro Palestine. Because the thing about Candace Owens is that she is anti Semitic. And the thing is that the way that a lot of news uh, sites has been talking about this, when we talk about this whole situation with Candace Owens being fired from Daily Wire, we have, for the most part, the headlines have been somewhat to the effect of being like, oh, she got fired for being anti Semitic. Mostly, I'm pointing out this Rolling Stone article, Candace Owens out a Daily Wire following anti Semitic comments. Despite the fact that that's not the reason, because honestly, they don't care about anti Semitism at the Daily Wire. Ben Shapiro has literally defended anti Semitism. And what I mean by that is, you might already know, but for the people who don't, it had to do with Ann Coulter, but she made some anti Semitic comments. And this was Ben Shapiro's tweet regarding the entire issue. Ann Coulter tweets, RE, Jews awful, nonsensical. Ann Coulter is also super pro Israel and has always been so, so I won't lose sleep. He's literally, at this moment, years ago, excusing anti Semitism, and he's never retracted this, by the way. He still more than likely stands on this. Like, he doesn't care about what she said being anti Semitic. It's just as long as she is pro Israel, he's completely fine. Despite the fact that you can be anti Semitic and pro Israel at the same time. I've talked about Christian Zionists before. That just goes to show that you can. And the thing is that Ben Shapiro he also doesn't really care about anti Semitism that much, anyways, because he has made arguments of like what a real Jew is, of like who is actually like he he's basically like it's this whole argument of like, oh, people like they say they're Jews but they don't practice Judaism, and it's a very anti-Semitic rhetoric because you're basically stripping someone of their identity that they have been since birth. And the thing with Jewish people is that it isn't just a religious identity, it is a race one too. Like, it's much more complicated than people who just study Judaism. It is also a race, a people. So making this whole clarification of people who aren't actually Jews or people who aren't actually Jewish, it's very dangerous rhetoric. It's not very new for Ben Shapiro to kind of excuse anti-Semitism. So like when it comes to this whole thing with Candace Owens being like, oh, they fired her because of anti-Semitism, which she has expressed in the past before all this. I mean, she was very much someone who supported Kanye when all that shit was happening, where he was being very anti-Semitic, and she still worked there. I mean, hell, we have this has kind of been well documented with Candace Owens. This is even from 2019, where she said along the lines of this.
Yeah, I agree. I actually don't have any problems at all with the word nationalism. I think that the definition gets poisoned by elitists that actually want globalism. Globalism is what I don't want. So when you think about whenever we say nationalism, the first thing people think about, in at least in America, is Hitler. He was a national socialist. But if Hitler just wanted to make Germany great and have things run well, okay, fine. The problem is that he had dreams outside of Germany. He wanted to globalize. He wanted everybody to be German, everybody to be speaking German, everybody to look a different way. That's not, to me, that's not nationalism. In thinking about how it could go bad down the line, I don't really have an issue with nationalism.
I mean, we don't really need to go farther than that, do we? She literally just said if Hitler just wanted, you know, Germany to be great, whatever that means in terms of him, you know, killing Jewish people, that would have been fine. Like, what does she mean when she says Hitler wanted to make Germany great? Like, obviously, I think she's being a little sarcastic there, but then, like, oh, this is what he thought Germany being great would mean. But, like, saying that, just kind of skimming over the whole fact that he would still be killing Jewish people. Like, oh no, if he was killing Jewish people and just kept Germany where it is and didn't invade anyone, that would have been fine. Does she not understand how terrible that fucking sounds? Like, this is just disgusting. Like, and by the way, this goes back all the way to like 2019. I would feel, well, probably like 2018 because this was like, when this was published, this was like 3 months after the actual event in which she's speaking at. Back in like 2018, she said this, and she still. I'm not sure if she was working with Daily Wire at the time, but like, even if she started after this, she still very much had anti Semitic beliefs. Like, this. What the fuck is this? The way that they announced her being fired was pretty funny. Well, let me see. She retweeted it. It was from what's his name? Jimmy Boring, the guy who runs Daily Wire. Jeremy Boring. Literally, his last name is Boring. He tweeted out, "Daily Wire and Candace Owens have ended their relationship," which is just a funny way to phrase it. Like, being like, "Yeah, guys, we broke up." But she also had this tweet. It was the pinned one that I was showcasing earlier. The rumors are true. I am finally free. Just absolutely disgusting. Just kind of wild. Um, Ever since she got fired, but again, just going back to it before we really continue, she got fired for being pro-Israel because I highly doubt if it wasn't for the fact that she is anti-Semitic and doesn't like Israel. Like, it probably, like, for, like, we already showcased, she has been, she's been anti-Semitic. She has anti-Semitic views. Like, even when Ben Shapiro stopped supporting Kanye West, she still was. Like, and that didn't get her fired, despite the fact that he was saying terrible shit about Jewish people. But now she's fired because she's mostly just talking about how she thinks Israel is bad. I've seen a good amount of people who have been, even with this, have been very, like, been pushing back because there are people out there who, ever since she got fired from the Daily Wire, like, she has been on a lot of shows recently since she got fired, including a very prominent black podcast called The Breakfast Club, which you may or may not have heard about. It's starring Charlemagne the God, who is a pretty prominent black figure, at least in the podcast realm. The Breakfast Club is a very, like, it has a very, like, big black audience. Like, it's a very, mostly because, it stars black creators who host it. They have on a lot of prominent black figures. They have had some very, like, controversial people in the past who have been, special guests like Dr. Umar, but a lot of people got upset when they brought Candace Owens on very recently. Like, it was very much like she got fired and she was on Breakfast Club almost the next day. And we're just gonna play a little bit of this.
You have the most volatile
This isn't from the podcast itself. This guy is critiquing him. Is critiquing the podcast itself.
Black
for having her on
in America. The first time we get an opportunity for someone black to interview her on a major black platform, what did we get? We get Charlemagne the God saying, "Hey, we want to have conversations, not confrontations." Sound like he want to be.
Here's the thing. Well, some of you may be saying, "Oh, well, Candace is black, so what's the problem with that?" The problem is that she's also very anti-black. She very much has white supremacist views. When George Floyd was killed, and there were protests around him, she very much shared a lot of similar views from far right white supremacist commentators who were very much, they didn't, they downplayed the murder, and they continued to spin the story of the protest itself, trying to make it seem like it was all this big, violent, anarchist state, when they were just cherry picking certain instances of people just not doing the right thing while ignoring a majority of the peaceful protests that were going on. And it was same with like the Breonna Taylor murder too. She very much, spitting out the far right talking points, downplaying it, being like, oh, cops aren't racist. She's had a lot of anti-black views in the past, a lot of white supremacist views. So for a lot of people, seeing her on this platform that has a very big black audience is definitely, it's gonna rub people the wrong way.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Club Shay Shay. I am your host, Shannon Sharp. I'm also the proprietor of Club Shay Shay, the guy that's stopping by for conversation and a drink today.
The gigantic success of Shannon Sharp's podcast, Club Shay Shay, and the Cat Williams extravaganza that produced over 60 million views. What we just saw was Charlamagne the God and the Breakfast Club want to emulate the formula that Shannon Sharp employs, which is just talk, say whatever you want. I'm not going to push back. I got no comeback for anything you say. It's your word.
And it is something like with the whole Cat Williams interview when that happened. A lot of people were like very much talking about it. My biggest problem with that is that while Cat Williams, there was a lot of stuff in that where Cat Williams was very much speaking the truth. That doesn't necessarily mean he was right about a lot of the stuff that he was talking about. And the problem with that is that he got to say a lot of that stuff unfiltered because Shannon Sharp just wasn't pushing against him. Like, that's the problem with a lot of these podcasters who are just like, I just want to have a conversation, is that when you have a lot of people, and I'm not really talking about Cat Williams in this regard, the misinformation that he might spread is a lot less dangerous than someone like Candace Owens. Nick Fuentes, who has been on a couple alpha male podcasts. Destiny had him on a stream once. Like, the rhetoric that they are very much going to spread and the misinformation they're going to spread is a lot more dangerous than just Cat Williams. Just being like, oh, I'm just having a conversation with this person who, even though Destiny is a debater, still kind of went about it that way. With a known neo-Nazi being like, oh, I'm just having a conversation with this person, it's very dangerous because you're just giving them an open platform to say all the dumbest shit that they can say. And because you're not pushing back against it, your audience is more likely to fall for that bullshit and become upset, and to be tricked into this ideology by these far-right extremists that is just going to create more anti-black sentiment, especially with someone like Candace Owens. Just disgusting.
We want people to just come up here and speak their mind. We get the viewership, we make the money. We have no obligation to our viewers, no obligation to the narrative. You could be toxic, Candace Owens, and you can say whatever. And it's all right with us. No, it's not all right. Well, it's okay with you, Charlamagne. It's okay with you, GJ Envy. And it's okay with you, Just Hilarious. But it's not okay with us.
That was almost a racist question.
Yeah, because just because there might be some people who are fine with this, fine with the conversation, and that is something that I was very happy about when I saw this being talked about by other black creators. There is pushback against it. It is, hopefully they do learn their lesson from this, but at the same time the damage is already done because they already had her on their show. And I did mention earlier, they also had Dr. Umar on. Dr. Umar is not even close to being a dangerous figure as Candace Owens. You know why? Because Candace Owens actually has a platform. Dr. Umar, the most you probably will ever hear about Dr. Umar is the memes that people create of him. Honestly, that was my introduction to him, and that was probably a lot of people's introductions to him. Even probably black people on the internet. I can't say from asking people, but I can just tell from you can just see from the media, he's not a big media figure. Candace Owens is, but because she's had this alt-right platform to prop her up, because she speaks a lot of the talking points that they like, especially the anti-black talking points. Like, it's dangerous to have her on these sort of podcasts. And she's been on others. I saw her on that, like, Whatever podcast, and that's literally the title of the show, Whatever. It's that, like, stupid red pill one where the guy just, like, where a lot of people make fun of him, despite the fact that they're, like, a red pill alpha male podcast. He feels very, like, insecure in the way that he talks. Like, it's very much just like a I think it was Jarvis Johnson call it a gentrified fresh and fit, which is like the best way to put it. But like I saw her on that, which isn't surprising because they've also made anti-black sentiment and talking points. But with this podcast, it's definitely disheartening because of who their audience is and like just the fact that they don't push back on her because they just want to have a conversation. But yeah, that's really what I wanted to talk about this whole situation. You think that, a far right wing personality getting fired from their job would be great news. If anything, I think it's a little bit more dangerous. I mean, the last time I feel like a big firing of this happened with someone on the far right happened was like Tucker Carlson getting fired from Fox News. In all honesty, I'm gonna be honest, I think Tucker has not recovered from that. I feel like he has definitely dropped in terms of prominence. Well, he was on like Lex Friedman's podcast. I don't think it's very similar in that way. Like, I feel like he's definitely dipped in terms of prominence online and just like in terms of like like just in terms of the media in general. But I think Candace Owens unfortunately has not gone that same route, and I feel like it's because of stuff like being on the Breakfast Club podcast, that's probably going to make her more accessible to a lot of people, which is a bad thing because of the rhetoric that she spews. Like, this isn't as much as I would like to celebrate this person who is awfully terrible losing their job where they can't communicate to a bunch of people anymore. I feel like this isn't a win because she honestly probably has a better chance at communicating to a large group of people now anyways without that platform, without that like media company holding her up, because someone else could easily pick her up, or she could just do the podcast scene and get a lot of eyes on her that way. Because of the talking points that she spews, which are generally terrible, it's going to allow people to latch onto that, and because of her identity as a black woman, it might trick people into that ideology because they're just like, oh, this isn't just like some white man telling me this. This is, oh, someone not only who is a different race, but also a different gender. So I can use that person as an excuse for my shitty talking points. I mean, people already do that with her in general, but I feel like this is going to allow her to get a wider audience, which isn't good. So as much as this might seem like a victory, it's very much not, in my opinion.